You're listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, that's a good start, the computer freezing up right there. But that's okay. I know we're still recording. We just don't have the video up yet. We'll have the video up there shortly. But here we are in episode 200 of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Sitting next to me, co-host J-Raff.
Yeah, what would 200th episode be without, some technical issues that we experienced a lot throughout, especially early on when we were still kind of finding our way. When we were finding our way through a lot of this, it was, one thing after another. We joke about all the time how we would kind of sit down and be so worried about every little detail we have to worry about and kind of keep in mind, but not necessarily all those little things on a weekly basis. But of course we get to episode 200 and we get a refresher course.
Of course, why not? And I mean, it still looks like that the live stream does not want to work through Ustream for what at this minute, but we're going to keep plowing ahead because we are live on Mixler.com. You can get that feed at jmnjrradio.com. It's right there on the homepage. You don't have to click anywhere. It's literally right there at the top. And we're going to have this video recorded portion as long as there isn't any mix-up at the beginning. We'll have that up on YouTube hopefully later today, if not sometime early this coming week. But again, this is the 200th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. And it's also really our 5th anniversary here coming up in just a few weeks. I believe the day that Justin and I sent those famous text messages to each other was around February 11th. And within 8 days, we had figured everything out, did test shows, and then I think our first show was like February 19th or something like that. So mid-February is where it all began. And, here we are. And it's kind of great timing to do our 200th show on the day of Super Bowl 50.
Yeah.
It's literally the biggest sporting event probably ever. I'm going to guess the numbers are going to say that.
Well, I mean, July is a pretty big sports month, so we have some things we have to consider there when we talk about big sports and sporting events. However, like the ESPYs and all that stuff. But Super Bowl up there, close to the ESPYs. I'm kidding, of course. Yes, today is one of the biggest days in sports, and actually, not that we talk about it a whole bunch, but some people say in terms of difficulty to get a ticket, Oklahoma City Thunder played at Golden State, which is in the Bay Area as well. Some people said it was harder to get a ticket. Now, they're not saying it was necessarily more expensive or anything. It's just in terms of the ability to buy a ticket on the market. Now, some of that has to do with a 20,000 seat arena versus a 80,000 seat stadium. Yep. That's part of it. But just a huge sports weekend in the Bay Area. Including and obviously being capped off by this huge Super Bowl, which I imagine ratings are just going to be unbelievable again. You'll end up with probably 150 million plus, which is right around half, a little under half, depending on what you're counting for the country's population.
Country's like 320,
right?
So
but
if
also,
they get to 160,
but those numbers are really hard to calculate too, because
that's only isn't that television sets? What
I
kind of the algorithm
know.
goes into that?
Right, I don't know. I mean, I figure they have to take into some account like licenses of like places that show it, like sports bars and things like that.
Exactly.
Like, maybe that licensing for that counts as a certain number. Like, I don't know. Like,
it'd be interesting to find out how they do that, because I honestly feel like they may be underestimating.
Oh yeah,
this.
I
would
would
think
think the number.
That's not just for
in terms of number of people following. You would think it would at least be 175, maybe 200. 2/3 of the people. Although it's funny, like every Monday after the Super Bowl, they always talk about this on ESPN radio. Like Mike and Mike, when they get the ratings, he's like, "Where are these people that don't watch?" He's like I don't know anyone. But in reality, you
working retail,
right,
emergency
right.
services.
There are people that don't watch. But,
there's people that choose to not watch,
right,
too. I'm not saying, like, you're either watching it or you're working.
It's funny.
There are plenty of people that choose not
to. That concept is just so foreign to you and I.
Well, and it was also...
Now, that being said, I didn't watch last year, and 4 years ago I didn't watch, but I was returning from the trip.
Right,
a school trip.
You didn't exactly have
right.
much of a choice there.
Right.
But there's people, that's part of the people that haven't watched.
Right.
I always thought that up at Penn State, like they sold out all their student tickets, which is usually 20 to 25,000. There's usually high 30s to low 40s thousand students at University Park. So I know obviously more wanted to go. They couldn't get the tickets, but there was a group of people that didn't want to go.
Right.
It was like,
and relatively a large group.
Saturday?
Like,
they're studying and whatnot. Good for
them.
them.
Good grades.
I have no problem with those people whatsoever, except when they try to like flaunt that they hate Penn State football or the Super Bowl, and they're like, "Oh well, I don't watch." Like, what am I supposed to say? Good for you.
Okay.
Congratulations. I don't know, but yeah. So 200th episode, 5 years of doing the show. I got to say, it actually kind of flew by pretty quickly. I remember doing our first show upstairs in what is now my second kid's bedroom. We had that single mic, which we told the story a million times, passing the single plastic microphone.
No
back
video,
and forth.
so it was
no
okay.
Video, yeah.
Like we were huddled around one computer and just passing the mic back and forth.
Yeah, a little bit different setup now, and it has been the case now for a few years. But it's been a lot of fun doing this, and we'll continue to do so. It might be a little bit less frequent in the next few months. Probably take a little bit more time off. Because this is a football show, by and large. We do, high school, college, and definitely NFL. I mean, we love baseball and hockey, but it's good to have some downtime here and there. So we'll hop on. We'll probably have a March Madness show. We'll talk NFL draft. We'll have a baseball preview and all that good stuff. We'll talk hockey, but it won't be the weekly affair as it's been pretty much the marathon since end of July, early August up until now. So. But let's get into things. Let's quick do our Super Bowl preview before we jump into the main part of the show. Was we wanted to do the listener special. We haven't done one in a while, and we like getting feedback from you out there listening to the show. And I know we have at least 4 or 5 emails. I wouldn't be surprised if we got one call. But to help other people do that, why don't we go ahead and give that contact information?
Yeah, we'd love, like Joey mentioned, we have a bunch of input already that we're going to touch on in just a few minutes. However, we'd love to have your take as we kind of answer some of your questions or talk about the topics that you kind of suggested. So we'd love to have you call the show. You can call the show using the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also email the show anytime, as many of you already did, using the Mays Sandwich Shop email inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com.
We also have presence on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter primarily. You could also get the show on iTunes. We have a brand new feed on there that's better than the previous one. The Blog Talk Radio Archive, which worked well for us for the first 4.5 years of the show. We now have better quality audio up on our iTunes feed, but that required a new listing. So search for the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show or JMNJR Radio in iTunes and subscribe to us, the podcast there.
Someone this week asked me, they're like, what was the email address again? And I was like, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff. And I was like, oh, it's just...
You're just repeating the show.
I was like visualizing, reading it off the screen. Like, that's the part that doesn't change. Like, I know that part. Phone number, I don't know. Like, I'd have to read that. But the email inbox, I've got that down pat. So another 200 episodes, and I'll have the phone number down pat.
I got a text from one of our better listeners, which would be my dad, saying he's not paying us to take time off. And I said I wanted to double the salary. And he said, "What's 2 times 0?" So, yeah, I'm almost certain we're going to be getting a phone call in the next hour then for sure. But before we take any calls, we want to give our Super Bowl preview because obviously there is that, besides this huge 200th episode, 5th anniversary special, after all 150 million of you stop watching our show, everyone's going to be racing over to CBS to watch the pregame and then the Super Bowl.
CBS to just live stream on CBS.
Right
now.
I'm sure we can do that. We got Jason and Pat have pretty good
they
tech
wouldn't mind at all, right?
I bet they would totally.
We'd even run commercials.
Right, yeah, why? If someone wants to pay me $50
That's
million
what we need.
to advertise
That's
the
what
show,
we need to do to talk to our sponsors about running a Super Bowl spot
Super
next
Bowl
year.
ad. That's right. And then prices for that are doubled.
Listen. We'll keep production costs on the commercial down. It'll just be like a black screen with. Actually, you know what? We'll come up with something for free.
Yeah. Right. We will create the ad at the no cost, but the airtime.
Yeah.
That's
if he just jumps up and creates that, gets us the time, we'll make it worth his while.
so as to not make it too blatantly obvious who we're rooting for, because I don't want to give it away.
Right.
I don't want to give it away, because you can clearly see that in the studio we are sporting Broncos jerseys, but we got this Panthers helmet here. And all of this comes from my collection over the years. Technically, that jersey was won by my dad at Beverly Hills. This jersey was my sister's because she loved the Broncos in Elway in the 90s. And then that helmet I got the year that Kerry Collins was drafted. So that helmet is 21 years old. It was acquired in 1995.
Yeah. So, digging some of the stuff out of the collection.
Yeah, we actually were wearing this exact getup probably about 70 shows ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago when it was Broncos Seahawks in the Super Bowl. We also did the morning announcements for West Lawn United Methodist Church in these, and here we are again. So I'm not gonna say we're rooting for the Broncos. We're just trying to get in the spirit of the game. But we'll get to our picks and who we're rooting for when we finish the little bit of preview that we have here. So Super Bowl 50, this is the big one. This is the one that NFL has been gearing up for probably for the last 5 years. I would think that they were thinking about this big game. They awarded the Super Bowl to San Francisco, I think about around that time, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
They knew Levi's was going to be out and
it was
in
a
service
reward
a few
for giving
years.
them the new stadium in Santa Clara. So still Bay Area. They talk about 30-minute drive and how that's a big deal. And the Patriots don't play in Boston.
No, they do not.
Some people would argue they're not the Boston Patriots. They're the New England Patriots.
Correct.
Touche. All right, but it's
they
still,
were the Boston Patriots.
Right. If you want to call them the Bay Area 49ers, go ahead. I don't really care. But it's San Francisco. There was space. They were able to get a great stadium out there. So good for them. Because the conditions at for lack of me being able to keep up with 1,000 of changes that the name took place, Candlestick,
right.
It was dated. They needed an update. It wasn't going to happen there, so they got him to Santa Clara. Now, there are all kinds of other issues that go on with stadium, and that could be an episode in itself, or 2 or 3, on stadium financing and things like that.
Oh my gosh.
However, that's not the point of the show. This is a big one. 50, they changed the logo. They didn't go with L.
They didn't want it to be Super Bowl L because that just lends itself to so many jokes.
Right.
But they announced that a few years ago.
Right. So it is Super Bowl 50. Now, will they go back?
They are. They already said that they will.
And
Next year
I
will
knew
be
that
LI,
was one of those things that as I'm asking, and I'm like, Joey knows the answer to this already. Mm-hmm. So I'll just toss one up for you.
Yeah, I just hit that one out of the park. Yes, they are going back. So next year in Houston at Energy Stadium will be Super Bowl LI. It's still Super Bowl 51. It just will have the Roman numerals will return. So we got that going for us. My dad and I are still hoping to get to Super Bowl LI next year.
Is that in Dallas next year?
It's in Houston.
Okay,
it's at Energy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
that
a stadium
cool
I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's relatively new.
Yeah, it's massive.
Got the Penn State connection with O'Brien down there.
Right.
Hackenberg's going to be there. So
yeah.
Hey, maybe we'll be playing in their home stadium.
Hey, you never know.
Cool.
Against the Eagles. No,
probably.
Now we're
just
being ridiculous.
Yeah, don't get too far ahead of yourself. Hey, you never know. Maybe Nick Foles will take you to the promised land.
Oh, gosh.
We'll get to that in a bit.
The promised land of the number 1 pick overall.
So, Super Bowl 50 is just the NFL. They've been hyping this up almost literally since last Super Bowl ended. As soon as the league year came around in March, you started hearing about their preparations and everything was going to have gold. A lot of the teams were selling stuff laced with gold. The 50s were emblazoned with gold number 50s at the midway part.
They awarded the alumni football, the Super Bowl alumni. They gave the footballs to all the high schools where Super Bowl players had played. And attended school, which was pretty awesome. And actually, we got to, I got to see those kind of firsthand this week, as they I think they had been at Wilson for a little bit. I don't know how long, but they kind of made their public
and as you're saying this, I'm
debut.
reminded that I wanted to pull this up, so let me see if I can do that here. If you're watching the video feed, which is working again on Ustream, so if anyone's listening on jmnjrradio.com, Ustream is working again. I don't know what the hiccup was, but for the recording's sake, I've pulled up the Facebook pictures of the Wilson High School football team, the Bulldogs, and here in West Lawn, Pennsylvania. What the NFL did, and I think we talked about this in March or April when the NFL announced it, they had a Super Bowl high school honor roll, and what it was that was any player that has played in the Super Bowl, their high school got a celebration, celebratory football that is completely gold, with the Super Bowl 50 logo on one side, and then the other side, each one was customized to say the high school, the location, their name, and then part of Super Bowl history with the Roman numerals of the Super Bowl that they played in, and then the NFL logo. It's really, really cool idea.
Yeah.
We heard about it. We were really excited to know that Wilson would be getting two, because it wasn't just the winners, the 50 or the 49 teams that have won in their roster. It was anyone that's played in the game. Now, unfortunately for our two players, Kerry Collins and John Gilmore, they both came out on the losing side, which I'm sure they're heartbroken over, because that's the pinnacle of sports, is getting to the Super Bowl and winning it. But because of their contributions, Kerry, coincidentally, the Super Bowl that my dad and I were at, played
insane.
As the starting quarterback of the New York Giants when they lost to the Baltimore Ravens in Super Bowl 35.
And to be honest, and we've talked about this before, I didn't have the ties to this area at that time. I lived here 6 months at that time, 7 months. So I didn't really have the ties that
There's the front
that
of the
really
football
pulled me to that.
Watching.
So I was rooting for the Ravens because that's where my family ties were, with my mom's side of the family being from Baltimore. So I was kind of rooting for them. And it was the Giants. I didn't want the Giants to win. And then in Super Bowl, I don't even remember which one it was, but actually it would have been, was it 40?
Which
or
one's
41?
That? 41.
Yeah,
You're talking about John?
Yep, Super Bowl 41 with John.
Right, the one that I just pulled up here.
Right.
It was Colts and Peyton Manning against the Bears down in Miami, a very rainy Miami. And I was pulling for the Bears because at the time I wasn't a Manning fan.
Right.
So John Gilmore being on that team, I already was on board.
Right, and that was one where I didn't know John before that. I've met him and come to know him since.
You were rooting against him on purpose. You were like, John Gilmore plays for the Bears. I'm not rooting for them.
It didn't exactly go like that.
That wasn't how it went?
But I was wearing
a certain jersey here.
I was wearing this.
As
I'm making a mess.
You're ruining everything. Hold on.
Yeah.
I got you. Hold that up.
As I was wearing this for that game. So yeah, it's pretty clear that I wasn't rooting for John. I wasn't rooting against John, to be fair. And honestly, now, if that were the Super Bowl to play out now, it would have been a much harder game for me because I've met John, and all the things that we've kind of done with the organization and just him being such a good guy and helping out the area and everything like that. That would definitely have been tougher for me. However, I was happy for Peyton, and we'll talk about that later in the show as well. But it was pretty cool to see the footballs. I really didn't want to drop them and scuff them or anything like that.
Right. So it is really cool that Wilson was able to get in on that, get those two balls. I think they may be working on some kind of presentation or something to that effect, possibly in the future. So if that happens, I'm sure hopefully we can get some pictures from that because that would be cool.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm sure John would be willing to do something. I don't know if Kerry would.
Right.
He hasn't been back in the area, at least publicly, in a long time.
Right.
I think the closest I've seen him is up at Penn State, where he was there a couple times for anniversary teams and autographs and such. But my dad says if we get Super Bowl tickets next year and the Eagles are in it, he's selling the tickets. I think he'd have a buyer.
I'm going to say I've got a buyer. I think we're safe on that front.
I think you are. But so Super Bowl 50, the big deal about it. It is really cool to get to those anniversary ones. I'm sure the next big one will be, they'll make a big deal probably for 60, but the real big one will be 75, 25 years from now. That'll be a big one. And they'll probably be working on They did a Super Bowl 50, a legacy, greatest Super Bowl players and whatnot, and they'll continue to do that for each of the big anniversaries. But Super Bowl 50 featuring the Broncos and Panthers. Now, entering the year, I don't know how many people would have, if they ever did betting odds for every single possible matchup, I don't know where Broncos Panthers would be. I don't think it would have been very low. I probably would have been above average, closer to the top than the bottom. You know, because your top probably may have been Seahawks Patriots.
Right.
Might have probably, or Seahawks Colts, something like that entering the year. You know, at like 8-1, or they're probably pretty high odds because you got to get both teams exactly right. If anywhere even does that. But Broncos Panthers. Panthers, I think, entering the season for a lot of people were hit or miss. Could they continue the momentum that they have been building on? Were they going to take a step back? It probably depends on what you thought about the Saints and Falcons.
Right.
On the Broncos side, you knew that their defense had been strong, but you could see Manning regressing. So I don't know if anyone really put them up there.
I think people thought they could win the division again, but they thought it was going to be close, and it ended up being close. But then they also didn't see them competing with the Patriots, which I'd say legitimate, but they didn't see them competing with the Colts. A lot of people thought the Colts were going to be the team to step up this year.
Possibly even the Bengals and Steelers, too.
Yeah.
I'd say most people had them somewhere between 3rd and 6th.
I would say, I would agree. And I would say the Steelers ended up being exactly kind of what we thought they would be at the beginning of the year.
Strong,
incredible offense, but not a good enough defense. And that's essentially where they ended up.
The injuries really, that hurt them
killed
big.
them.
That hurt them big at the end of the year.
Bengals ended up being exactly what they've been every year. They got there on a different path this year, dominating the regular season, then just injuries killed them, and then stupid plays. Penalties, So I guess that's kind of the same road.
That's the Bengals.
So it was the same exit, but they took a different route to get there. And then, when you talk about the Broncos, it really, even though it looks different, from the outside, they jumped out to a great record. They had a little bit of a lull there, but they turned it on at the end. We've seen Peyton do that essentially his whole career. Maybe not the first couple of years, but that was the Colts teams. They were always strong all year. They were the 1 seed. We had both 1 seeds playing each other.
Right. And I think I had looked it up that it happened. I think, now I'm going to forget what the exact scenario was.
Didn't it happen last year?
Right. Yeah, it had happened also last year. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this is actually the 3rd consecutive Super Bowl to feature the number 1 seed from both conferences. But prior to Super Bowl 48, it had occurred just once since 94-95.
That's insane.
And that was 09-10.
Right.
And
that's when they redid the playoff structure, too. It's interesting to kind of see how it goes. Like you said, it's kind of obvious we kind of joked about it. It's kind of obvious where our rooting interests lie. Personally, I'm really hoping Manning gets it and can ride off into the sunset like we've seen the Denver quarterbacks do before.
Right. This, to me, is the polar opposite of last year, where I didn't want either team to win.
Yes.
But I wanted to pick a team to win just to have a rooting interest, because that's fun.
I agree.
The Seahawks had won the year before, so I went with the Patriots. But either way, I wasn't really excited about it in any capacity. 2 years ago, I was all on the Broncos because I didn't like the Seahawks. Here we are now 2 years later, Broncos are back in it, but I don't really have anything against the Panthers.
Right. No, me either.
If either team wins, I'll be happy.
Yep.
But I'm pulling for the Broncos just because I'd like to see Manning get that one, and silence some doubters, go out on high.
We talk all the time about how you can't ever bank on getting back there because it's just so hard and so difficult and all that stuff, and there's no guarantees. But let's be honest. Let's be honest. If we have to bank on one of these teams getting another shot, it's the Panthers in their current state rather than the Broncos in their current state.
Prime.
Right. So, when you just have, if you look at it that way, what Manning's done, I'd love to see him get one and be able to walk away if that's what he chooses to do. I know there's some rumors out there that LA wants it. That basically he's done in Denver after this year. He's done. Now, whether
is he a free agent, or they just have to release him?
I think they'll release him because of the salary. But part of that's because Osweiler is also a free agent. Osweiler's up, so they have to keep him.
He showed enough to continue to build with.
And I think Manning gets that, but they talk about how there is some tension there. But we'll see how that plays out. I think if he wins, it's easy for me to say. If he wins, he walks away. If you win, then I could also see him justifying to himself, look, I just won the Super Bowl. How can you say I can't play? You know? Right. But I don't know that he wants to go to LA.
I really think that this was a revelation to him that he still has it, but is losing it.
Right.
And the injury, he just can't recover as much.
Right.
To go out on a high note like this, and he's not going to be out of the NFL. He might take a year or two to do like commentating, whether it's with one of the big networks or ESPN. He'll do that, I'm sure. Maybe he'll take a year off and then he'll do that for a few years. But he's going to be a minority owner for one of these teams, or he's going to be on the executive side and be, a personnel evaluator. I don't see him being a coach. I think he'd be a good coach, but I think he wants to be even more hands-on.
There are people that want him to go and be the offensive coordinator at Tennessee.
People I think want to see him in an executive role or a minority ownership role in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So that's the future of Peyton Manning. But in the present for Peyton Manning, he's got a 4th Super Bowl to play, 4th different coach, which I believe is the only player or only quarterback, at least in NFL history, to get the 4 Super Bowls with 4 different coaches.
Which is funny.
That says a lot.
Because they were talking about this morning. I think they were talking with about Cam Newton, about how close they were to firing Ron Rivera and just hitting the panic button. Basically, they thought I'm having a little bit of a regression. They
waited because we told them to.
Right, exactly. We told them it was a bad idea and to wait it out. But of the 11 quarterbacks, I don't know if it's of the 11 that have played in multiple Super Bowls or the 11 that have won multiple Super Bowls. 7 of those had the same coach for 5 or more years.
Wow.
Which this is the 5th year for Ron Rivera and Cam Newton together. So they tied that together. Whereas, on the other side, now Peyton had coaches for long periods of time, and it happens over the career. But like you said, it's his 4th Super Bowl.
Right. He went and won with Dungy.
Right.
He went and lost with Caldwell. He went and lost with Fox. Now he's there with Kubiak.
Right. To go with 4 different coaches is insane.
Wow.
So
that's the Broncos. The Panthers, Justin talked about a little bit. Ron Rivera, we said keep him on. This is what, 3 years ago before they went on this 3-year streak of winning.
Well, actually, I think it was only a year and a half ago.
Was it really?
It was only a year and a half.
And then they went on
because they were like 7-2 or something like that, and won like 6 straight to get to 8-8 or so. It was something like that.
You're right. I think they were 2-7, and then they went 6-1.
Right.
In their last, I think that's what it was. I think it was
because they almost fired him, and that was when Cam had was Cam's car accident last year or the year before?
It was last year. Because they said up until that point, he hadn't lost a game.
Right.
A regular season game. He was undefeated.
Yeah.
They lost that one game to the Falcons, but even the best of teams get tripped up. There are a lot of people throwing some hyperbole out there as this Panthers team being one of the all-time greats, which is crazy to think about.
But if they win today, the numbers kind of back it up. The numbers I saw of their turnover, they're plus 39 in turnover differential this year, which is insane. Which tells you the Broncos can't turn it over today.
No,
if they do,
they have
they
to
lose.
Play flawless. They can't have a C.J. Anderson oopsie moment.
Nope, they can't have any of that. And
Manning can't think too highly of himself throwing downfield. He's got to be a game manager.
He has to do what he did against the Patriots. When you throw downfield, if it's not there, miss out of bounds. Josh Norman comes down with it out of bounds. You know what it is? Time to punt. It's so I.
All right. I want to do half an hour on the listener questions. So we're going to wrap up the Super Bowl stuff here with 2 quick, easy things to do. 1, how do you think the game's going to play out? And 2, who do you want to win? We kind of already did that one, but why not just say it? Who do you want to win?
Okay, I want the Broncos to win.
I want the Broncos to win. All right,
so we settled that.
We kind of just said it earlier. We both are on Manning. But again, it's the opposite of last year. If the Panthers win, I'm not going to whine or complain or bellyache or be disappointed. Good for them. I have nothing against them. Luke Kuechly is an amazing linebacker. Yep. Cam Newton has proved many people, including myself, wrong. Right. I love Ron Rivera, so I like seeing
Thomas
him
Davis,
succeed.
trying to play with a broken arm. Yeah. All that stuff. That's awesome. That's awesome stuff.
Another positive, if the Broncos win like we want, though, is Jordan Norwood.
Yep, absolutely.
Is a former Penn State wide receiver who, was a nobody coming to Penn State, then had a great career 3-4 years there with Michael Robinson to start and Morelli, and then finished with Darryl Clark. He doing it with Deion Butler and Derek Williams, and that happened near the end of my college career, and then a few years after I left. But seeing Jordan Norwood And he's not just on the roster; he's contributing.
Right? Yeah.
He's one of their receivers. He plays on special teams, so it's awesome to see him catching balls from Manning, possibly in the Super Bowl tonight. So that's why we're for the Broncos, Manning, Norwood. But again, whoever wins, I just hope it's a fun, entertaining game.
Absolutely, that's what I'm hoping for. And this was another crazy stat. Actually, why don't we go on to the next thing, and then I'll just give the one last crazy stat.
What do you think's going to happen?
Okay.
We said who we want and why. Who do you think's going to win?
I'm taking Carolina 31-17.
Oh, okay. So you 2 touchdown victory for the Panthers.
Yeah. I think it's going to be one of those where you end up with if Peyton could have gotten him another touchdown, but at the same point, like I think what we've seen from the Panthers so far. Now that goes against the stat I'm going to throw out right now, actually, because the timing's perfect. I think the 33 teams or something like that have scored 40 points in the playoffs, whatever. They're 5-28 against the spread.
Okay.
The following game, so after they blow somebody out completely.
Do you know what the Super Bowl spread is?
It was 4.5. I think it jumped to 5.5 because money was
in favor of Carolina?
pouring in on Carolina immediately. So it jumped up. So I think it's 5.5 on Carolina.
Okay. Well, I'm actually, I don't know why. This is just the way I feel. I mean, I do know why, and this is where I'm going to go. That old adage, that old cliche, defense wins championships. And do you know what Denver has?
Number one
defense. And I got burned 2 years ago with the Broncos going up against the number one defense in the Seahawks. I thought Peyton Manning and the Broncos, who at that time were a very potent offense, I thought that Denver was going to be able to have their way with them, and Seattle proved that wrong almost immediately.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to right that wrong, and I'm going to go with the number one defense and the Denver Broncos, who I think are being underrated a bit here.
I would
agree
agree with that.
Because of how dominant the Panthers have been, how flashy the Panthers are. I have nothing against them, but I'm going with Manning, the experience. While some people say, "Oh, he's 1-2 in the Super Bowl and he got blown out 2 years ago," I don't care. This could be the last game of his career. I think there's a lot of players, including also DeMarcus Ware, who is a seasoned veteran, who wasn't. I think he came over the year after they lost the Super Bowl. I think this is only his second year with the team, so he wants this one too. And I'm sure any veterans that have come over in the last 2 years, they want this victory as well. Not that the Panthers don't, but when you couple that emotion experience with the number one defense, something's just telling me to go Denver. I think it'll be a little bit more low scoring than, like you said, Carolina's been putting up the numbers. I think Denver puts a lid on that a little bit, and I'm going to go Denver gets the victory. I'll say 23-20.
Okay, then that fits kind of the motto you and I go with a lot of times, where if you hold a team to 20 or fewer, you've got to win the game.
Yep.
And
if I score 21 or more, I want to win. Or if I hold
that's
them to 20
how I
or
feel
less.
I feel like the Denver defense has to think we have to keep them under 21. We need 3 touchdowns in this game, or 21 points. If we keep them under 20 points, we win the game. And I don't know that the Denver offense can do it. I'd like to think they can. I think they can be creative enough to get it done. We'll wait and see. And maybe the defense can help out a little bit in getting some of that done too.
I was able to sneak an entry into the WEU morning show on who's going to score the first touchdown. My dad told me that they were taking these kind of prop bet type things on the game, and you could call in. Well, I called in, and the show ended before they took any more callers. They only had 2 people enter that contest because they ran out of time. So I actually tweeted him from the Wilson account. I tweeted Mike Keller. I was like, well, you didn't get to my call, but I was going to take Ted Ginn because no one had taken that yet. I heard Demaryius Thomas for sure. I don't know who the first one was. But he's like, all right, since you tweeted me right when the show ended, I'll take it. And it's like a prize pack or something if you win. But I took Ted Ginn because not only is he one of the leading receivers for the Panthers, he's also a special teams ace, kick and punt returns if he's out there for that. So I just think Ted Ginn was the first one I thought of.
What would be crazy is if you ran it back for a touchdown. Like the opening kickoff back for a touchdown, because the year the Colts won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning was the year Ted Ginn ran the opening kickoff back for Ohio State against Florida, and Devin Hester, and then Devin Hester returned the opening kickoff against the Colts back for a touchdown, and they lost to the Colts.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe Ted Ginn feels it, takes it to the house. I win the party pack. But then the Colts, the Colts, the Broncos go on and end up winning the game. Yeah, that would be crazy.
One cool thing, real quick. The Nationwide Insurance Building in Columbus, Ohio last night, the lights were on that said "Good luck, Peyton." Like,
wow,
yeah,
nice.
it was cool.
Okay, so a couple quick NFL things to talk about before we move on to the listener stuff. This came up today that I thought we should just mention. People were passing it off as fake, but it ended up being true because Adam Schefter, the official Adam Schefter account, actually tweeted out that the Eagles are probably not going to tag Sam Bradford with the franchise tag,
which is fine.
Like
I'm
$20
fine
million
with that.
a year or whatever it would be.
Because think about it. Actually, I guess they're based off of this year's numbers, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Which is good because
average of the top 5.
Because Drew Brees is $30 million next year is going to drive that
higher
QB cap number up. Yeah.
So they don't want to keep Bradford at that price. I can't say I blame them, but then there's a report that because of new head coach Doug Peterson's
who
link
drafted
with
Nick Foles,
who worked with him in 2012, that if the Rams release him, which they owe him money the third day of the league year, and he lost his job to Case Keenum.
Right.
Why should they keep him around at what is like $6 million bonus or whatever it is? Yeah, $6 million roster bonus in mid-March. Why keep him around if he's not going to play?
Yeah.
If they cut him loose, it sounds like the Eagles could be interested. And that throws a lot of interesting shade at Chip Kelly and his regime. What Howie Roseman would do would be like, you brought in Sam Bradford for Foles. We're getting rid of Bradford and bringing Foles back.
Yeah. But here's the thing, like, look at, I don't know. He had a good rushing attack last year in St. Louis, and he was the worst quarterback in the NFL. Like, you got benched for Case Keenum. Like, I don't know.
People would just point out it's because you don't like the Eagles. You don't like the Eagles. I never thought Kevin Cobb was a good quarterback.
No, we saw Kevin Cobb, and we saw
Kevin
Cobb's big game, and we called it right there. We're like, this is going to blow up in the Eagles' faces. It did, and then same thing.
Nick
for
Foles had
Nick
that
Foles.
massive game again. Was it even against the Rams?
It might have been
when he had like 6 touchdowns or whatever.
Yeah, no, it was against the Raiders.
Well, yeah, you're right.
It was like 7 touchdowns. Yeah.
So there's that. My dad texted in about the prop bet stuff, the WU stuff. The whole reason I was able to get in is because he brought my attention to it. But he had called in when they were doing the color of the Gatorade, the winning team, what the color of the Gatorade, and he was like the second to last pick, and he got stuck with either purple or clear/water. Now he took the purple, which I think it's a long shot because generally I think you see red or orange.
You might see blue if it's Carolina.
Right, yeah. I don't know if they have that any kind of correlation there with the team colors or not, but he has purple. So if whoever wins tonight and there's purple Gatorade dumped, he will also win some kind of prize.
He'll be dumping Gatorade.
He'll be dumping Gatorade on himself then. All right, and then last night were the NFL Honors, which is their end of the season awards where they announce all the big hardware handed out. And the biggest one was MVP went to Cam Newton, not a surprise at all. He also won Offensive Player of the Year. A lot of recognition for Antonio Brown. He was the Fantasy Player of the Year and also the Greatness on the Road Award. He came second, I think, in the MVP and Offensive Player of the Year race. J.J. Watt won his third Defensive Player of the Year award overall and second straight. Todd Gurley and Marcus Peters were your Rookies of the Year on offense and defense. And Walter Payton, Man of the Year, Anquan Bolden. And Carson Palmer and Adrian Peterson won the FedEx Air and Ground Players of the Year. Vincent Jackson got a Salute to Service award. Aaron Rodgers got his Play of the Year probably for one of his Hail Mary passes. Drew Brees got the Clutch Performance of the Year. And I think the last one to mention, Comeback Player of the Year, went to easily. I think that was an easy one to Eric Berry, who overcame his cancer diagnosis and treatment to come back and have one heck of a year for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that was a lot of these. I don't think were difficult. Just like Coach of the Year, Ron Rivera. There were probably each one of those you could argue for 2 or 3 players, but I think they kind of nailed these on the head this year.
Yeah, I think they got them pretty good there. So it'll be interesting. You see a lot of Cam Newton there. You don't see a lot of Denver Broncos on the list.
Hey, it's a team game.
But that's exactly right. They're going to need to get it done. So, we'll see how that turns out, and we'll definitely be talking about it for a long time, regardless of how the outcome ends.
The Hall of Fame class of 2016 was also announced last night. The big headliner was my buddy Brett Favre getting in his first year of eligibility. Joining him will be Tony Dungy, Kevin Green, Marvin Harrison, Orlando Pace, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., Ken Stabler, and Dick Stanfel. a lot of relationship to the Super Bowl this year, though, because Kevin Green played the last few years of his career with the Panthers and one of the great sack masters in NFL history. And Tony Dungy and Marvin Harrison obviously were with Peyton Manning in Indianapolis when they won the Super Bowl.
Eddie DeBartolo revitalized the 49ers franchise.
And they were able to win, I believe, 5 Super Bowls, 13 division titles, and make the NFC Conference Championship game 10 times during his ownership.
I have to say this, or else I'll probably get in trouble. Eddie DeBartolo Jr., a Northeast Ohio guy. I learned that from my roommate Joe.
There you go.
Big DeBartolo fan.
All right, so that's the NFL preview, the Super Bowl stuff, and we're going to move on now. We have a couple questions here from listeners. The first one actually came from my wife, Kelly. She wants us to talk about the Olympics, something we don't talk about often here. Probably last time was 2 years ago when the Winter Olympics were going on. We probably touched on it a bit last May when we did the greatest female athletes of all time, because a lot of those revolve around Olympians. So the Summer Olympics, though, are coming up this summer. In Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which will be the first Olympic Games ever held in South America. I think the opening ceremonies are around August 5th, or maybe the competition starts then. So it's the first week of August, and then running for just a little bit over 2 weeks down in Brazil. It's officially 180 days away, so we're pretty much exactly 6 months removed from the start of the games. And according to the official Rio 2016 website, over 10,000 athletes from 206 different countries will be competing during the 17 days, and there'll be over 306 medals awarded, and across 42 sports. And there are 2 new ones this year. Golf coming back after an absence of 112 years. So the last time golf was a part of the sport was, 1904? And rugby coming back after 92 years. Do not have baseball, softball back yet. That will be back in 2020, however. So.
Right, which means golf was only a part of it for the first few Olympics.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't.
Well, was the first Olympics in 1896 or something like that?
Yeah, I think so, because Atlanta was the centennial. No, 2006 Athens was the 100th, wasn't it?
No, because they wanted the 100th.
Okay.
And it went to Atlanta.
Okay, so that was 96.
Yeah, because Greece got it in 2004.
Okay.
Yeah, 96 was Atlanta, 2000 was Sydney, 2004 was Greece.
There we go. You're right.
So so golf has not been around for a long time in the Olympics, which is interesting. It's always weird to me how some of these sports get in.
Yeah.
When you have 42 different events, just looking at some of these that are listed here on the site, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay then. But some of the questions from Kelly are about what should we watch for, what are the most exciting events in our opinion, and what do we think about the location. The location one's probably the one that has the biggest controversy surrounding it. A lot of people think that the Olympic Games, these international competitions, could die because of the cost involved from, proposing to get selected, to being selected, to building up the event, for the event itself. Some of the countries and communities are impacted, not usually positively.
No.
They usually get a lot of flack about it, and Rio is no different.
Right. Usually they come in, and the way it'll work are that they'll get all these tax breaks and all these things, so that none of the money that is going to these things actually ever makes it to the country itself. It stays within the pockets of the people who assigned the Olympics. And that's not specifically Olympic. The Olympics alone. That's lots of the international competitions where they award these sites. However, there's also some questions about the legitimacy and safety of some of the venues in Rio and these Olympics. They've done a couple pieces, and the IOC keeps trying to hush these people out. And actually, the person they brought in to kind of oversee it wanted to be like, look, this isn't right. And they, the international aquatics, whatever. One of the events, the international people, basically they brought in somebody, and he started to speak out look, this isn't right. We're putting our people at danger because the water quality is so poor. It's like raw sewage at some of these areas for these open water events. And the IOC basically pressured this other organization, and they kicked him out after 5 months in office. They got a new head. They're just exerting, not saying, hey, you're wrong. They were saying, hey, shut up.
Hey, be quiet.
Right. So that's becoming an issue. And basically they've got the athletes, strong armed. These aren't big time athletes in these open water events. I mean, let me phrase that. They're not big name athletes that have these huge these huge endorsements and everything, and millionaires like that. It's not like the NBA players that are playing in the basketball. This is people who this is their life.
Right.
Working for this and doing everything they can to support their dream. They know that these people aren't going to be like, you know what, the water quality is bad, I'm going to withdraw for my safety. No, they're going to compete either way, and the Olympics know it, so they don't have to do anything about the water quality. But they said there's literally a chance that like during the rowing, that like a carcass of a dead animal is going to interfere with the race. Like that's a actual legitimate concern that like the oars and things are going to get stuck on debris and dead animals.
Similar to 2008 in China with all the smog, the air pollution that we talked about. If you've listened to the show, and my wife knows this, my favorite Olympics are the Winter Olympics because I can't get enough hockey. Like watching Olympic hockey is amazing. I love watching, and basically any of the stuff on the ice, especially speed skating too. I enjoy. I love watching curling. It's like every 4 years you get excited for curling. I love watching curling. I still don't completely understand it, but curling is really, really exciting to me. The next Winter Olympics is in Pyeongchang. South Korea, I almost said North Korea. I don't think they're holding the Olympics in North Korea.
Yeah, not
South
so much.
Korea in probably late January or early February 2018. But again, the Brazil Olympics, the Rio Olympics this summer in August 2016, probably the ones that people most look forward to are swimming and track and field.
Yeah.
And I believe the U.S. contingent is probably going to be favored. They always have people nipping at their heels. The Australians are usually pretty strong. And there's usually a couple individuals that get it going. But the Americans are always favorites in the water. And they're going to have some pretty big guns back from not just 4 years ago, but over the last 8 years, decade plus, the Americans have just dominated. I think that's going to be the same this year in Rio.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about the open water, so that's all taken care of.
From an individual standpoint, it'll be interesting to see how Michael Phelps ends this all out. This has to be his last. I say that it doesn't have to be, but it's kind of like Peyton Manning. Like I can't really see a situation where it's not his last, especially considering his next chance would be a minimum of 4 years away. Right. Yeah. If you told me Peyton Manning couldn't play in another Super Bowl for another 4 years, obviously this would be his last one.
Yeah, and they have events in between, but everyone talks about the Olympics.
Phelps has changed. He may not compete in the huge, wide variety of events, but he's focusing in on a certain few, which is probably good for him. I hope he continues his domination. It's a lot of fun to watch. Some of his comebacks, some of the ones from Beijing were just absolutely unreal, and that was 2 Olympics ago.
Got Kelly and I. We watched basically if we were conscious, the Olympics were on. When we were at the gym, they were on TV. When we were at work, we had them up because we were working with computers. We had them on streaming. Thankfully, NBC was doing that. When we were home, we had them on. We just sat there and watched it, and because they were in China, the timing was interesting. They were actually doing the big stuff early in the morning over there so that we could watch it late prime time here so that we could see it live, which was cool to see it live, but to know that they were swimming at 10 a.m. and we were watching at 9 at night it was interesting, or however it works out. But yeah, watching Beijing was awesome 8 years ago. London was fun 4 years ago, but now 2016. I think is Lochte still on track to? Well, see, that's the
he'll
thing.
Be there.
A lot of people are 6 months out. They gotta know. These teams aren't decided until May?
Yeah, usually
something
May.
It's going to be late spring, very early summer when a lot of these groups will be decided.
I've actually met some water polo Olympians, and they've told me that it's kind of crazy. When you get selected for the team, there's these meetings in Southern California. You basically go into it's almost like a store. It's set up, and you have a shopping cart, and there's a list of things you have to get based on your events, but it's all sponsorship gear. All the wear, all this. So there's certain things you have to get, and then there's other things that you can just get if you want, and it's just you just fill your shopping cart with all this sponsorship stuff, all these, either Nike or Speed, or whatever the group is. You get whatever. It's kind of cool, but it'll be interesting to see. Like you said, I'm always interested in track, just because especially the 100 meters, it's insane to me. When you try and think about this. So essentially, we talked about football earlier today. They're running almost from the back of the end zone to the far goal line. Essentially, they're running more than 100 yards, and they're doing it in less than 10 seconds.
Right.
I think to translate that, I think Usain Bolt's like 40 time, translated 40 time is something like a 3.6 something or something like that. Like, full like, almost half second faster than like the fastest ever at the combine. Now I'm not saying that would translate onto the football field exactly the same way, but it's just insane how fast some of these people are. And some of them, like Usain Bolt's like 6'5", 6'6", like he's a beast, But and actually the knock on him is that if he trained harder, he could have even been better. Like he's really good and he trains, but they're like, he's so good he hasn't had to train as hard as he possibly could. Like
oh boy. So exciting events. Personally, I said I like the pool events, swimming and diving, really, really exciting. Water polo too, fun one to watch. I really, because it's only every 4 years, I kind of get excited by almost anything. They can put almost anything on the screen and I'll watch it. Basketball, but that's not as exciting because you expect the U.S. to win. If we don't win in men's and women's,
exciting
it's a huge
because
letdown.
Of like pressure.
Right, yeah. Because you expect men's and women's to come out on top. I forget fencing. Every 4 years it's fun to watch that. Soccer or football.
Right.
I think actually 4 years ago the U.S. didn't even make the Olympic team.
No,
they weren't allowed to compete. I don't know if they've qualified yet for Rio.
I think they have, but I'm not 100% sure.
Gymnastics then is kind of really, if you're not looking at the main professional sports such as basketball and soccer, you're talking about the things that don't get as much attention until every 4 years comes up. It's swimming and I'd say gymnastics.
Yeah.
And then track and field too.
Yeah.
Swimming, gymnastics, track. Those are the three big ones outside of soccer and basketball that people really focus on. So the gymnastics ones are always incredible to watch. That was always one that got Kelly and I really going in Beijing, going up against the Chinese team, because there's always
right.
a little bit of interesting stuff going on with how they operate. Rowing too, I always enjoy watching rowing. That's an interesting one. The stamina and strength that it takes to do that. So that's a cool one to catch up on a while. And volleyball, I love watching volleyball. Whether it's the two people in the sand or it's the full team event in the
right.
gym, those are really fun to watch. And again, the U.S. is usually really, really strong in both of those events as well. So, well, I think that's it. So thanks to Kelly for sending in the Olympic question. Let's move on to your wife now. She sent in a question that's not football related, but she's curious about these answers in general. Why don't you read them?
All right. So it starts out, it's not football related, but generally, if we could be on any sports show or ESPN show, which one would it be and why? And if you could be a guest or a co-host or a commentator, just kind of elaborating on that. And then the second one is, who's your favorite ESPN sports commentator, host, announcer, etc., and why?
Let's do the first one.
Okay. I think it would be a lot of fun, to be on College Game Day on a Saturday morning.
I think that would be a pretty cool one too. Yeah.
The other one I would say is, I think it would be cool to work with Scott Van Pelt. If I had
SVP is awesome.
Right.
I think he was still doing radio.
Right.
SVP,
that would be really
SVP
cool.
and J-Raff.
Yeah. There you go. But I think College Game Day on the Saturdays in the fall. Oh my gosh! I don't know.
If I'm picking an ESPN show, it'd be College Game Day. If I'm going in general and I'm not doing just radio, anything in general, I probably would pick something like NFL Total Access.
Okay,
on NFL
something
Network,
really
because
cool like that.
You're not just going to do Total Access. You're going to, but you're going to be there for the draft. You're going to be there for free agency. You're going to do all that stuff, and you're doing football 24/7, 365. So I like the College Game Day one for being ESPN centric. But if we're going in general, I'd probably pick something on NFL Network. Total Access, the one that jumps to mind. That's cool. Or Game Day Morning.
Oh, that would be a cool one. Yeah,
something like
any
that.
of that stuff.
Those would be awesome, and I would want to be one of the co-hosts. I don't want to be a random person they bring on.
I think it would be cool to work with Red Zone on NFL.
Be the new Scott Hansen?
Right. Yeah. I don't know that I could do that, though.
Yeah,
that's a long time to not go to the bathroom.
And he's got to know everything else. I mean, I know he's got sheets and iPads in front of him.
But that would be a cool one to work with.
Red Zone would be cool. Yeah, Game Day, any of the ESPN, any of the NFL Total Access Game Day Morning, one of those.
That would be
cool.
Or,
Red Zone. Something with Red Zone would be awesome. You kind of already answered number 2, I think, with Scott Van Pelt.
Yeah.
But is there anyone else that off the top of your head?
I think it would be cool to do the Mike. That is grown. That's its own entity, And I get that they've been around so long. That's kind of where they're at. I kind of like Russillo and Cannell. I You know what? Actually, I like Russillo and Cannell. Sometimes they drive me a little nuts, but that's okay. Like that's part of their what goes along with it. But I think it would be awesome to be on Highly Questionable with Dan,
with Joe,
and yeah, we actually talked about that. But with Dan and Bomani and Dan's dad, like I think that would be funny. That show has grown on me. I really like that show.
I agree with you with Scott Van Pelt. He's still. I mean, I have that ESPN embargo pretty much since November 2011. Actually, most sports talk. ESPN was a huge culprit, but almost anyone I pretty much gave up on. But Scott Van Pelt is one of the big ones. But then I think back to College Game Day. I love Reese Davis.
Yeah.
I love Fowler.
Yeah.
And I love I know some people don't. I like Herb Street.
So do I.
So
I think Herb Street is fair and good at what he
does.
does.
Those three ESPN college guys, and then Van Pelt. Those are the big ones. I know your top of your list is Mark May. But those three guys, Fowler, Davis, and Herb Street, those three would be really cool.
I think that would be awesome.
Van Pelt, and we're thinking outside. It's hard to go wrong if you're talking about, former ESPN, now NFL Network, Rich Eisen is also a cool one.
That would be a fun one. I think Dan Patrick, that's a kind of crazy, situation he has with his show, how they're, it's just a group of guys on it, that kind of hang out and do that. That's kind of weird, but that would be a cool one, a non-ESPN one to do. But yeah, that's kind of the trend I would go. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are good questions from both our wives about the Olympics, which we don't talk about enough, and then kind of what we're doing now. But if it was mainstream, related to those guys or who we like or who we idolize, I think we nailed it though with those picks. I don't think you can go wrong with some of those guys. Then your dad writes in about some football related questions. So he says, given the continuing and growing concern about serious life altering effects of football related injuries, 1, do you think the NFL will survive the current scrutiny it is experiencing, and 2, remain the number one pro sport in popularity?
To give the quick answer, yes, I think it'll survive. To remain the number one pro sport, I say yes for the foreseeable future. Things change, so over time,
I want to
how
say,
long are we talking? Could it, change? Could something take off? Possibly. Basketball could really take off because of just the globalization of basketball. However, when you play 82 games, or even if they lessen it, they're looking to, it's not that 1 day a week football thing.
Right.
And I don't know that.
I think that's the biggest thing in the NFL's corner is that
it's an event. Every week.
You want to say out of sight, out of mind, that's the big thing. But in football term, you only get, in pro football, you only get it from September through December, essentially, because there's limited pool in January and February. You're only getting, at most, 12? Oh, no, it's not 12, is it? Yeah, it's 12 teams.
Yeah.
Left in January.
Yeah.
That's it, 12 from 32. So that's why you only get football for 4 months, September, October, November, December, professional football.
Right.
So 8 months out of the year, you don't get the main event. There's other stuff, because the NFL has done great that 11 out of the 12 months, it's NFL is the thing to lose.
That's what has propelled it, so high.
They have a key off-season event that grabs everyone's attention.
Right.
And I agree with you when you kind of said, all right, do you think the NFL will survive the current scrutiny? Yes, I do. And 2, will it remain the number one pro sport in popularity for the foreseeable future? Yes. If we were talking decades down the line,
and that's not to diminish, hard to predict. Right? That's not to say I think they will come to solutions that work to the benefit of reducing those long-term issues, and whatever that is.
And they already have every year. They're adding something new, whether it's a change in rules, whether it's better medical practices, just research,
changing those
preventative measures.
So I think it'll be steps in the right direction. Now, I don't know. I don't know how long that'll be effective. I don't know, but I don't see it being, honestly, you look at it, there's lots of stuff that people know about and people still watch.
And I don't want to rail on research and concussions and say that it doesn't exist, because clearly stuff like that happens. It does exist. It's not football specific, though. It's not the only place that it happens. No. It's just because of the intensity that the NFL gets, and the people relish those big hits, people focus on it. But there's been thousands of people that have played football, but the only ones they talk about are the few that something tragic ended their life, or they found this after they died. But just because they found it after they died, if they can't prove that it had any impact on them dying, like if it wasn't a suicide, you know, they and even then you can't say definitively is that the reason that happened. There'll be people jumping on board on both sides, being like, no way was it that reason, and other people saying absolutely that was the reason. I'm not here to say yes or no to that, but while it's an issue and a problem that's out there now, I think there's too many smart and talented people from all levels in the NFL organization and the team organizations to get it right. There's too much riding on it.
Too much money.
And when you talk about
there's too much money riding on it to not find
the almighty
solutions.
dollar.
Solutions will exist, and that's part of it. Like, I saw a thing about a different model for helmets, and not just talking about removing the face mask, but simply helmets as we know them. The padding on the inside gives, but the shell of the helmet is rigid. And this was actually changing the helmet slightly. It still looks fairly similar. You know, it looks like just a different brand of helmet, but it actually gives a little bit. So it actually, the whole helmet is kind of slowing that percussive, reaction with your brain, kind of tucked away in the middle there. And that's kind of the way that works out so that it, tries to slow down the impact. I think that's an interesting idea, and I think that's along the lines. Not that that's the answer, but I feel like that's along the lines of where some of these answers are going to be found. Also, you got to limit the hits to the head, which they're working on doing. You got to do these things. And as much as I sit here and complain about that can't be right, they need to be able to review that. That's a different aspect of it. They have to be like, look, you can't hit him in the head. You can't do it, and as much as, I hate it when it happens against my team or it affects a game or something like that. The big picture, not a big deal. They need to limit those hits like Burfict gave to Antonio Brown.
And the last thing I want to mention here regarding the concussions and stuff like that, a lot of people make a big deal out of last week. The NFL released their report on concussions in 2015, and the number had skyrocketed, like hundreds of percent higher. But it's not saying that the players are playing dirty or that it's a more dangerous sport. They're diagnosing them because they're making it happen. They're saying that player they have people saying that guy can't be on the field. You need to have him looked at. You need to have,
they're just getting a more
doctors.
accurate picture of what's going on.
So, of course, when you have a wider pool of people being evaluated, you're going to have more people diagnosed with actual concussions. If they're not being looked at, they can't be diagnosed.
It's like if they didn't give drug tests and were like, hey, nobody tested
positive.
No one
tested positive. Congratulations. There's no one on drugs in whatever sport. You play anything. It doesn't have to be a sport. It could be workplace or whatever you're talking about. Hey, you don't do drug tests, no one's going to test positive. You do one drug test a year, maybe a handful get tested. You do one every week, a lot more people are going to test positive. It's just the way it goes. So with better measures diagnostically and preventative, you're going to see those numbers shoot up. Both the people in the program and ones that are confirmed that have gotten it. It's just that's the way it's going to work. So
real quick, the second question from my dad was, or actually third question.
I was going to actually say we're going to do that next time.
Okay, then we'll
come back. I don't want to rush through something because
that's good.
They took the time to write in, and I want to give them the full time to answer, but we got so many and we had to do the Super Bowl show that we're going to actually push this off to the next show. None of them were time sensitive. I quick glanced over them. So we thank everyone that wrote in. We're going to get to all those questions. Not many of them, if any, were very
If you have follow-ups
if you have
ours,
follow-ups to or
keep
something about
in.
the Super Bowl or anything that we mentioned here, definitely send those in. Not only do we have the ones left over in email, I also had some text from my dad. He was asking about Penn State and James Franklin. The recruiting class stuff just happened. So whenever we do our next show, I don't know if it'll be in February or if it'll be in early March, we'll talk about that. But our next show, we will wrap up the listener special. But we're very appreciative of everyone that took their time to send in questions, and we will get to them. We're not forgetting. We will answer every single one of them.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's the end of episode 200. It's been a great 5 years. We thank you all for being along for the ride. If there's anything that we can do to make the show better, definitely send it our way. Joe Mays and J-Raff at gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, JMNJR_radio. Joe Mays and J-Raff at JMFlyer1454 at Mr_Raffoff. Any shout outs this week? Any birthday mentions or events coming up? Wilson Mini-Thon was this weekend, and we wanted the broadcast from it. We were approached the broadcast from it, but with other stuff going on this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it just was too much.
Right.
It's a lot of work to get ready.
Life gets in the way sometimes.
To do a remote show. So we thank them for reaching out, and we congratulate them on raising more money this year than last year.
And I think
over $63,000 raised for the Four Diamonds Fund at Penn State Hershey Medical Center.
And I think, we mentioned they're approaching, $150,000 over 3 years, which is just incredible. And honestly, to see at working at the school, seeing how it's kind of how people have really taken to it. Like in the line dance, I think one of the lines was like, "This is our calling to finish this fight," or something like that. Like it was like some of the kids, like it is. I don't want to say giving them a purpose, but they've really taken up the cause, and really are doing that. And I know some of them talk. Not all of them go on to Penn State, but I know, for example, one that went to another school, and they don't necessarily do Thon necessarily, but it's something similar, and she is already involved in that at her school. For pediatric cancer research, and some that do go into Penn State look to get involved in Thon. And another thing they're seeing is lots of underclassmen getting involved at Wilson.
I saw a ton of middle school kids last night.
And like all the elementaries and middle schools raise money, and then you get a lot of freshmen and sophomores in there, which is great because then they get into leadership roles even sooner.
Right,
as
they're
juniors
already
and
excited.
Seniors. Right.
They got 3 years to do it.
You're starting to get some of the siblings of the.
Well, it's a snowball effect, and it's you also get the trickle down and spider webs of like you said, the kids that don't go to Penn State, they can either help start something similar or get involved with something that may be raising for another incredible cause.
Never the wrong time to do the right thing.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of incredible charities out there, but the one that Thon focuses on is the Four Diamonds Fund to conquer childhood cancer at Penn State Hershey Medical Center.
So that was the big one I had there.
Yeah, congratulations to the Wilson community and the staff and the students that helped put on a great show again. Yesterday we were up at community hours from 6 to 9 at the high school gymnasium, and it was a lot of fun, another good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know that I have any other shout-outs. I guess I should mention there's going to be a couple birthdays probably while we're off. One of them being Rich, the Pats fan from Massachusetts. So happy early birthday to
I wonder if he's even going to bother to watch tonight.
He's still too upset.
Actually, I bet he will, and I bet he'll be rooting for Peyton Manning. As crazy as that, like,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Not necessarily the Broncos, but I think he'll be rooting for Peyton Manning. I think that with the success, and I don't know that. Maybe that's a good question, listener question for him. But I think that the way the Pats are, that he can be secure enough in his ability to root for Peyton Manning to finish up. You know what I mean? Because them winning takes nothing away from what the Patriots have established. It's not quite
actually even makes
not quite like me as an Eagles fan rooting against teams I don't like.
You were this close to beating the Super Bowl champs, right?
Exactly.
This close. I think that's everything. You done? Anything else to say?
I'm good. Nope.
All right. Well, then thanks for joining us, and thanks for a great 5 years.
Yeah.
This wraps up the 200th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.